All right, so good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, we're all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And today we are diving back in with conservation. All November long, we have been featuring stories from across the globe, the Arctic, Indonesia, East Africa, and more. Some amazing places, some amazing people, and some amazing stories. So thank you so much for continuing to join us as we celebrate such cool scientists and explorers worldwide. So today we're joined in a presentation that I've actually never got a chance to be a part of, so I'm really excited personally to be involved today, because we are going basically to the other side of the world. Literally, if you took where a lot of our classes are joining from today and went straight through the earth, you'd end up not too far away from the Seychelles Islands. So we're going to learn a little bit about them in general, the Vallée de Mai. We're going to learn about the amazing species, unique habitats, and amazing conservation work being done in the Seychelles. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our big team there at the Seychelles Island Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies, and take us away. Everyone, and take us away. Hi, guys.
So my name is Hector, and I am the science coordinator here at Vallée de Mai, and here is my team.
Hi, guys. So nice to have you here. So do we want to dive right in with the first presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. I'll bring that up for you guys, and you guys can talk over it. Come as close to the camera as you can, and we will get to this thing. Let's do it, everybody. All right. Awesome. It's up. We're good to go.
Okay. So thank you again for answering present to our little gathering here to talk about the species that we have here at Vallée de Mai. So we are here in the Seychelles. So if you look at your map that you have, can you see that blue dot? So that's actually is us here. So, and if we go next, again, you can see how far you are from the Seychelles. So Canada and UK is a little bit closer, but Canada is even further from it. So Seychelles is well known for its beautiful beach, and its multicultural society, and also for its beautiful wildlife. And this is because of that we need to protect it. So to protect it, we work with different organizations, but today here we will talk about one in particular, the Seychelles Island Foundation. So this is for who we work for. It's a non-profit organization that has been built in 1979 and rely a lot on tourists, grants, and donation to work properly. So COVID kind of affected us a lot.
Yeah.
So Seychelles Island Foundation manages two sites, the Aldabra Atoll and the Vallée de Mai. So you're here today at Vallée de Mai. So it is one of the smallest UNESCO site of heritage in the world, and it is found on the second biggest granitic island of the Seychelles. So today we will talk about three main projects that we work here at Vallée de Mai. So we will talk about the coco de mer, the black parrot. So my teammate will talk about the mist netting, observation, and ringing events that we do with the black parrot, and the invasive alien species, which is a species that has been introduced to the Seychelles. So all of this cannot be done by ourselves. So this is our big team that work here and do a lot of research work, and you will have the chance to meet some of them. And yes, so I will not take more of your time. I will leave the floor to my colleagues.
Okay. Right.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Coco de Mer first.
We can do it. Whatever talk you want to do first. It's entirely up to you guys.
All right, so hello everyone. Hopefully I'm not cropped. There we go. I'm gonna stay a bit further back. So hi, my name is Leroy, and I will be presenting the opening for the Coco de Mer. So you can skip slide, please.
Yeah, and Leroy, could you come a little closer to the camera so we can hear you a little bit better?
Yeah. All right.
Thank you, Leroy.
All right, is that better?
That's much better. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. All right. So the Coco de Mer Thank you. I got a chair just for a bit. So, coco de mer. You guys must have heard of the coco de mer before. The scientific name is Lodoisha maldivica. It's an endemic palm found only here in the Seychelles. And next slide, please. Yeah, and it was first, can say first discovered on the Maldives island. And over there, they didn't know where the coco de mer came from. So they had a little theory going on, they like, maybe there's a plant that grows beneath the ocean and that will produce the nut and then it will float and that's where it came from. And back then, the coco de mer was very, very expensive because of its rarity. They didn't find that much on the Maldives island, yeah? But if you look on your slide now, you will see the distance that the coco de mer had to travel
Wow.
from Seychelles to Maldives. And frankly speaking, coco de mer is pretty heavy. Huh? It can weigh up to 15 to 30 kg, and that thing wouldn't float. Yeah. So when it falls in the ocean, first it will sink, and then the kernel on the inside will rot, and then it will float, and it will travel the distance to Maldives. Next slide, please. All right, so this is the two islands that you can only find coco de mer on, Praslin and Curious. You can find it on other islands of the Seychelles like Mahe, Silhouette, and Ladig, but all these islands has been, the coco de mer has been introduced. All right, next slide, please. All right, so these guys can get pretty big, huh? So they can grow up to 34 meters high, even 40 meters high, especially the male, because they are the one that the pollen needs to fly down to the female ovary, which I will explain later. And also their leaves can grow up to 7 to 10 meters high, long, and also the width can be 4.5 meters. Next slide, please. And here in this image, I've put that you can see the size of the forest itself, and with a man or human in general, you can see that the person is pretty small, very tiny, and the coco de mer, the CDM around are very, very large. Next. All right, so the coco de mer is a dioecious plant. That means they have a separated sex system, you can say. You have a male tree and then you have the female. So on your left, you will see the female inflorescence. Those little flowers that you see, we call them like a tennis ball. And when they are receptive, there will be a clear liquid that comes out the front. And the pollen from the male inflorescence will fly in the wind down to the female inflorescence, and that will pollinate it. Next slide to continue. So like I've mentioned, the wind will help to pollinate the female inflorescence, but also we have the geckos that depends on the coco de mer for food, but they will also help to pollinate the coco de mer in general. Next. All right, so after the flower has been pollinated, it will take around 6 to 7 years for the nut to develop itself. And of course, because it's pretty heavy, it's very spectacular. That thing is huge. And when it falls, it makes a very, very spectacular sound and it's very devastating. You don't want to be under that thing when it comes off the tree. Yeah. And the heaviest ever weight was like 42 kg. Some of you kids probably weigh about that amount of weight. Yeah, so you can imagine you weigh pretty much the same weight as a coco de mer. All right, next slide. All right, so the husk. So you have the skin of the coco de mer, right? On the inside, you will find the popular shape that you guys are familiar with, but the husk is is what you see on the tree. Yeah, so you have to remove that husk for you to see the coco de mer on the inside, and that will be a protection for the coco de mer when it falls off the tree, so it doesn't get damaged. All right, so it looks like this. Oof, we had these things set up for you guys, but since I'm sitting down, I cannot really show you what it's like. All right, next slide, please. All right, so inside of the CDM, you will find the coco de mer kernel, and that thing is pretty much the same as coconut flesh, but it's very, very hard. It's not edible. Trust me, if you try, your teeth is gone. That's why it's very heavy. So in the past, people used to export that, but we don't that anymore. I will leave that for my friend to talk about it later. So please, next slide. All right, so I think that's my cue. Actually, it's not my turn anymore. So Manu, come in.
So hi guys,
Hey.
I was here last time. I don't know if you guys remember me. Anyways, so previous slide, a bit to ahead there. Okay, so firstly, question the kids can just ponder. Do any of them know what a keystone species is? Okay, so we can get to that after, and we'll see if the kids can answer that question. Okay, they get to think about that. So I just want them to take a look at this two pictures. Take a real good look because they see the CDM tree, the coco de mer tree, and a few other things is going on there. So they just have to bear that in mind. Next slide. Okay, so something to add to what they looked at previously is we have a coco de mer snail, a Praslin snail, and a Seychelles black parrot. All these species, including others, depend on the coco de mer tree. Okay, next slide. Okay, a few more. There's geckos and the white slug. All these, you can see them on the CDM or doing something involving the coco de mer tree. Next slide. Okay, so we have a regeneration scheme set up here in the Seychelles in the Vallée de Mai for the coco de mer tree. Okay, so this is to maintain the healthy coco de mer population, the sustainable harvesting, and data collection for further research, as well as protecting it against poaching and other illegal activities. Next slide. Okay, so for data collection, you can see we got 2 field workers out in the field measuring the length of the CDM. So it's through these processes that we get the information that we are able to give you guys. Okay, and then if you look at the center image, there's a metal tag which allows us to identify each seedling, each plant individually. And currently we have about 530 nuts in the scheme. Next slide. Okay, so we have several threats to the coco de mer, mostly poaching. You can see the 2 images. There's on the left, there's a nut that was taken down out of the tree, and they just dug the jelly out of it, and they just left the empty shell in the forest. And on the other image, you can see where they had started to peel the nuts. You can, if you take a look, you can see that the husk is still quite green, like a light green, which means this would have been ideal for jelly, so before it becomes the kernel. Okay, next slide. Then we also have forest fires, which is a huge danger to any forest really, but in particular the coco de mer trees, because there are so little of them. The Seychelles Islands is very small. So in comparison, if you think about a forest fire, it'll easily burn many acres of land in a few seconds, and Seychelles doesn't have much of that. Next slide. Okay, here you can see how the forest grows and how we've had to make fire breaks. So we have pieces of land where we reduce the amount of vegetation to help prevent, if there's a fire on one side, that it can't spread to the whole place. So that also gives the firefighters time to try and control a smaller area. Okay, next slide. Okay, so here we have a bayonet of the coco de mer tree. So from the nut, when it germinates and grows, it first gets a spike, and then this is the first leaf that comes out. Okay, next slide. And I think this is my colleague's turn now. So I'll hear from you guys after in the questions. So bear in mind, keystone species.
Fantastic. Thanks, man.
Greetings, everyone. Hi.
Greetings.
I'm here to talk to you guys about the importance of coco de mer. Well, I based it down into 3 factors, as you guys can see on the slide. There's economically, the biodiversity, and the culture. You can go to the next slide, please. Now, economically, as my colleague was saying before, Leroy, that the kernel of the coco de mer is extracted, and well, this was a practice that was done before, that they used to export it to other countries, mainly Asian countries, so that they could use it as medicinal purposes, for medicinal purposes. Yeah. And thus, like, helping the country economically in the Ministry of Tourism and Culture. Yeah, if you could go to the next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the biodiversity. Because this plant is so big and it has really, really big leaves, it creates a funnel. So once it creates a funnel, once rain falls, it goes down the funnel and it goes down to where the roots of the trunk grows. So thus it creates a really good how would I say this? It creates very good organic waste. Sorry, organic waste, and as well, it creates debris so that it can create its own natural,
Yeah.
how could I say, manure
Yeah.
medium. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah. So if we could go to the next slide, please.
Sure.
And culturally, in the Creole culture, the coco de mer was a great significance to the locals. And also the whole tree itself was used, to the leaves, to the nut itself, to the inside. They used to eat it as dessert. And they used to make really cool pottery with it, where they used to put all sorts of things inside, like rice or stuff like that, where I can show you an example here. Um, Everyone can see. This, they used to use this as a bag as well. You carry things inside it. You put your fish. Yeah. And also as well, they used to do a few medicines with it as well. Well, not with the kernel itself, but with the tree's, could I say this bark? With the tree's bark as well. Yeah. All right. Yes. To love nature is to respect nature. I think I'm going to hand this one over to my colleague Emmanuel. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So that's the end of the
Is it?
So yeah, guys. So that's it from the coco de mer side, and yeah, just a little message from the coco de mer team. That yeah, to love nature is to respect nature. We'll get back to that. Off to Black Parrot now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, guys. And the materials that you're bringing in right now when you're showing them, they're in a little screen on the side. So keep them around so at the end we can bring them back in for all the classes. But this has been great so far. Let's bring in the black parrot and continue on with this, guys. Thank you so, so much. Right. And perfect.
So my name is Monica Griffith and I work with the Seychelles black parrot here. So there used to be two parrot species in Seychelles. There was one that lived on Mahe, the main island, and a couple of the islands around, but that's extinct now, so we only have the one on Praslin left. Slide, please. The project was set up in 2009 to find out pretty much everything about the parrot because nothing was known about it at the time. It was actually thought to be a different species to the one it turned out to be, so it was totally new. So we were just looking for pretty much anything we could learn.
Yeah.
So one of the big things, what do they eat? They mostly, obviously, eat the native fruit. They really favor palm fruit, and they mostly feed in groups. So you can see on this picture, there's quite a few all feeding on the same fruit together. But they now have a bit of conflict with locals living on the island because they destroy fruit crops. They are particularly fond of mangoes, and it's mango season right now, and they can obliterate a mango tree. So as part of the project, we ring, or band if you're in Canada, birds here. So we put unique rings on each bird that we can to try and to help us identify them. And we can learn things like, so right now we have birds that were ringed at the beginning of the project, that were ringed as adults. They're still around. So we know they live for at least 13 years. We don't know how long they live yet. So we're learning so much about them. Every year we add more information. We also take blood samples. This helps us find, so we can do genetic studies. That's how they realize that they're in fact a different species to the one they thought. We can also find out if they're male and female, and if they have any diseases that could be a problem to the species. Their breeding behavior is pretty strange. They're quite unusual for a parrot. So they're kind of boring looking. They're uniformly brown, but in breeding time, their beaks go yellow. Only the female incubates, but she has helpers, which could be males, could be the parent, could be maybe siblings. We're not entirely sure who these helpers are, but they feed the female, so she doesn't need to really leave the nest. So then she spends very little time away from the nest. And they also, very unusually for parrots, have a unique call. So every single female you can identify by listening to it. So if you start playing these calls, that's one. And then play another. That one went funny. Okay.
Cool.
So you can hear that they're really quite different. So once you've got your earring, then you can really you can walk around the forest and you can just hear them and go, oh, she's over there. Oh, she's come. She's wandered away. Why is that? Which is, well, it's odd.
Very cool. Oh, there we go.
Yep. So this is.
There we go. Sorry.
This is a video. If you start it playing, of mutual feeding. So the bird on the left is the female, and the one on the right is a helper who is feeding her with food from his crop. So he's called her out of the nest. He's feeding her, and then she can go straight back into the nest. So she's away from her eggs or chicks for minutes rather than hours that it would take to go and collect food for herself. And particularly unusually, so she comes down the tree, and the video will follow her. There we go. And she gets fed by a different bird. So this is how we know that it's not just her mate who's feeding her, it's other birds, and as yet we don't know who these birds are. We are, with the rings, we are hoping that we will learn in the future, maybe it's her nest mates, from when she was a chick, maybe it's her daughters who are learning how to look after their chicks for when they grow up. We're not entirely sure. There's questions. Keep going. We also found, so we look at where they nest. So they predominantly nest in dead coco de mer cavities. So these are just long, straight trunks in the forest, kind of like really tall chimneys. You can see the picture on the left is a really deep cavity. They do occasionally also nest in broadleaf trees as well. So in any natural hollow that they can find, really. This presents a challenge. So, because of the ridiculous size of the leaves in this forest, it's very hard to see a parrot when the leaf is 5 meters wide. It's also very hard to look inside these nests because even though the trees are really strong when they're alive, when they're dead, you can literally push them over with your hand. Wow. So we've had to come up with ways to monitor the nest without affecting the nest itself. So this is a baby monitor on the end of a really long stick. We lower the baby monitor into the nest, and it's infrared because it's meant to see in your baby's bedroom in the dark. And we have a handheld monitor that we can look at, and we can see as it comes down, we can see exactly what's in there. We also have a ridiculous system of standing ladders. So this is you can see I'm on the top of the ladder there, and my colleague is on the floor. This ladder is supported by ropes. It is not leaning on the tree, because if it leans on the tree, it'll push it over. So it's kind of a vertical ladder to the sky, and then we use the baby monitor from the top of that. It's quite fun. So part of the project, we looked at the egg growth of, so we learnt that they take roughly 2 weeks to develop from first being laid to hatching. Going. Oh. I love this video.
That's about as cute as it gets.
This is a newly hatched chick, so you can see its eyes are massive, but they're still closed. So they, like a puppy, their eyes are closed at first. They've got pathetic little wings and feet, and you can actually see there's a knobble on the top of his beak. That's his egg tooth that he uses to break out of the egg. Wow. So he'll lose that in the next day or two. So we've also looked at the chick development, how long it takes them to go from that little hatchling blob to a full-size parrot, and they kind of turn into dinosaurs along the way. At first, they're quite pathetic because they're too weak to hold their heads up. They're like a baby, so they're just kind of these little wriggly blobs. But they develop pretty quickly and then turn into fledglings and just look like full-size parrots. Yeah. So they go from that to, yeah, I love it. This is a fledgling. So this parrot left its nest the day before this video was taken. So it's still pretty shaky on its feet because they grow up in a hole in a tree. So they're not very used to using their wings or anything. So then they stand in the tree and they hold on for dear life, really. And they practice moving around. Their mother will come and feed them, and eventually, as they get stronger, they'll follow her around the forest, and she'll take them to food. So you can see here, he loses his balance, and he has to use his wings to hold on again, and nearly falls off. And they're great entertainment, really.
Very graceful.
Yeah, exactly. So as they get older, they get really, the typical parrot abilities of, being really dexterous, really good at climbing around and using their beak. But at first, they're quite clumsy, and they're good fun to watch. So they just sort of fall off things. Unfortunately, they have a lot of there's potential threats here. So they're not evolved to deal with predators. We have no natural predators on the island, but now we have invasive rats, cats, and miners. Climate change is also proving to be a bit of a challenge for them. Keep going. This is a nest from last year. So the bird on the right is the mother, and the one on the left being fed is a chick, 2 days before it was due to fledge. So this was taken with a camera trap, and then this is that night. So the rats can find them. They will climb up into the nest and will kill everything inside. Because even though the parrots do have very strong beaks, they don't seem to know that they have strong beaks, and they don't seem to know to stand up for themselves because they're not evolved to deal with predators. Keep going.
Oh, there we go. Sorry, there we go.
So this is the most recent season, which has just been odd. So breeding season 11 last year didn't happen. There was absolutely no breeding recorded anywhere. They're meant to have eggs round about December. This year we got eggs in July. So we've just had a breeding season. This picture here is taken from, so it's from the baby monitor. This is a parrot with a yellow beak in May, which is unheard of. They don't seem to be able to read the sort of the signs, the environmental signs. They don't seem to be able to cope with the weather patterns. This year we lost, so we had a lot of nests in a strange time of year, and we lost quite a few to big storms because the trees are still, at certain times of year, they decompose more. And then the base of the nest gave way with eggs inside, and then the eggs broke. And because we're living on such a tiny little island, then they can't really go anywhere. If climate change just breaks the system, then there's no options for them. So that's us. And it's important to remember that even if you're far away and you're thinking, well, yeah, they're really far, but everything's connected, and climate change is really beginning to affect things here.
Yep.
That's all.
Monica, that was fantastic. Right. Diving in with yellow crazy ants. Let's do it. Thank you guys. So, by the way, thank you. So, before we continue with this third story, I just want to say thank you to the whole team. It's been such a team effort today, and so many people. Hearing from all of you has been really, really special. So, I really, really appreciate it personally, and I'm sure all our classes love it too, and can't wait for questions when we're done. Yeah, let's dive in.
Right. Hi guys, my name is Upeksha, and I'll be telling you about yellow crazy ants today. So this is what a yellow crazy ant looks like. You've got the big queen in the middle, and then you've got all the worker ants around her. So the yellow crazy ants are actually an invasive species. So an invasive species has two characteristics. The first is that they are introduced by humans. So you don't find them there naturally. So they could be trees or animals, but humans introduce them to an area. And the second thing is that they spread really rapidly, and they have a negative effect on the ecosystem. So you can go to the next slide. So YCA are one of the worst invasive species on the planet, and they're a really huge problem because they're able to form super colonies. So usually when you get ant colonies, you only have one queen ant, and the queen ant doesn't like any other queen ants coming in. But with YCA, they're all right to have a couple of queen ants, and so they all kind of group together with their colonies and form super colonies. And they're really aggressive and competitive, and because of their super colony formations, they can outnumber and displace other species. And they also dominate food resources because they're so aggressive and there's so many of them. And they have the ability to spray acid out of their bums. So if you can see the little darker area on the ant at the back, it's called a gaster. So they use that gas to just spray acid onto other animals, and eventually they do kill them. So you can go on to the next slide. Okay. Yeah, so YCA are a global problem. And as you can see, they're usually so along the equator and to the north and to the south of the equator. So in, I guess, warmer areas. But they're on all continents, they're across the entire world. So you can see in Africa, South Africa, in the US as well, and India, Sri Lanka, towards Southeast Asia, and also Australia. So next slide. And what's cool about the YCA project is that we're always in touch with other countries who are dealing with YCA as well. So they let us know what's happening with them and what they've learned and what they're doing right now. So in Australia, we got an email a couple of weeks ago, and they sent us these pictures. So on the left, you can see a YCA infestation in Alligator Creek. So that's kind of like agricultural land. It's not residential. But you can see all the blue areas are where YCA are, and so they're being treated accordingly. And then on the right, you've got YCA infestation in Douglas. So it's a residential area, so they could really be anywhere. So what's really cool is that we can share our expertise and our experiences and then learn from each other across borders. Next slide, please. Right, so coming back to Seychelles. In the Vallée de Mai, the YCA are a real problem because they're able to attack all these native and endemic species. So they attack the wolf snake, the white slugs, the tiger chameleons, birds, Sicilians, and skinks. And I'm sure you can imagine the number of ants it would take to kill a snake. That's quite a few. So they're able to use the acid that they have to overcome, these huge animals who eventually die. And it's an issue because we're losing a lot of the endemic species in the forest. So, for example, when you talk to people who've worked with SIF for a while, the white slugs used to be they're quite populous in the forest, and now you barely see any of them. So that's a big issue. And also, when you get rid of the slugs and the geckos through the YCA, they are actually pollinators for this coco de Mai. So that's also an issue. Next slide. Right, so the SIF has been controlling YCA for a couple of years now, and we take a couple of steps to try and solve the problem. So the first thing we do is we try and monitor the population of YCA with surveys, and we monitor the species affected by YCA, and we do this thing called baiting, which I will explain later. So firstly, the way that we try and estimate the abundance of YCA in the forest is that we do these jam transects. So you can see that little card on the right. It's got a little circle in the middle, and we put some jam in there. We lay it down on the forest floor, and we come back 1 hour later. And then we come back, and then we count all the ants that have come around the jam. So we don't only count YCA, we count all the ants. And you can see Orly on the left. She's using her clicker to count the ants. All right, next slide. And so this is us doing some surveys of species affected by the YCA. So we actually did this quite recently. And what we do is we go to different coco de Mai trees around the forest. So we go to male trees, female trees, and also juvenile trees. And we use our binoculars to look all up and down the trees, along the leaves, to see if we can see any of the geckos or the mollusks that are endemic to the forest and that are affected by YCA. So you can see a Seychellensis gecko on your right, a coco de Mai snail, and also a Praslin snail. So we look for a bunch of species like that, and we've got to note them down. And really, by the end of the day, when you're looking up at a tree the whole day, your neck kind of starts to hurt. But it's okay because you get to see some cool species that you don't usually see if you're just walking through the forest. All right, next slide, please. And right, so the final thing that we do, well, one of the things that we do, is we do this thing called baiting. So essentially, we have bait. So they look like they are fish food. It's like fish food essentially, and it's got a little bit of poison in it. And we've got to cover the entire forest floor with this bait. So we do that every couple of months. And what we have to do is, well, we go out into the forest in groups of 4, and then we stand like 10 meters apart, and we've got to go straight through the forest, just chucking this bait around. So take 3 steps and chuck it to the left, take 2 steps to the right, and then you chuck it to the front. And then, yeah, so it's quite difficult because it's in some places it's super steep and there's super dense vegetation. So I'm sure you can imagine how difficult it is to walk in a straight line across the forest, chucking bait around. So next slide, please. Okay, so you can see on the left, they're baiting in this super densely vegetated area. So it's all the way up to their heads, pretty much. And then you can see Leroy in the forest chucking his bait around in the middle. And then the final photo is Hansel. And so we don't want any of the bait to actually get into any water sources because it can contaminate the water. So along the river, I see are these things called bait stations. So it's kind of like an alien spaceship. So we put in liquid bait in here, and it's like a blue liquid, and then we kind of release it, like loosen this a bit, and it'll release a little bit of bait, like over time. So then the YCA come and take that and go back to their colonies and hopefully poison them. So at the end of the day, where SIF has managed to reduce the abundance of YCA in the forest by 80%. And it's really all down to teamwork and kind of understanding your colleagues and understanding that everybody has strengths and weaknesses, but you've got to work together and you can achieve what you want to achieve. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. What fun, guys. Holy, we covered so much together. Awesome. Wow, 120 comments on YouTube over the course of this presentation. So if you are on YouTube, please let me know if you're a full class where you're joining from, as we'd love to hear, get a sense of all our classes tuning in today. So our team, yeah, come on and thank you guys so much. Wow, we covered, again, so much ground together today, which is awesome. So I hope all our classes enjoyed as much as me. And then if it's okay with you guys, let's dive in with some questions with our classes and take as many as we can in the next 20 minutes or so. Does that sound good? Fantastic. All right. Well, welcome into all our classes. I'm going to start with Mr. Shattuck's class. If you guys want to come up 6, 7, 8 to kick us off with a question, go for it and come on in.
Come on in. Yeah, okay. Shy today.
Hey, Mr. Shattuck.
Hey, how are you?
Awesome.
We're wondering, is there a hope of completely removing the yellow crazy ants, or are you just hoping to control the population?
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to completely eradicate not completely eradicate, sorry. We want to reduce the abundance to something that's manageable by 2021. So before we had 100% coverage of YCA all over the forest. So now we've reduced that by 80% and we'll reduce it a bit more and kind of control it to something that we can maintain.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Shattuck. All right, Miss Haney's class, if you guys want to come in, just demute your microphone and we'll check in and see if you guys have a question. We'll go to Killaloo next and Miss Stott. So Miss Haney, come on up if you have a question. And if not, I can come back to you in just a second. All right. I might come back if we're waiting. Let's do that. Let's come back in a second. Let's go to grade 3, 4s in Killaloo. Just demute your mic, guys. Come on up.
Hi there. One of my students had a question, a concern about the parrots and why the parrots were being held by the necks.
They weren't being held by the neck. Oh, where am I? There we go. The only way we can hold them, so we kind of hold them between our hands. So we hold the wings down with your fingers on either side. And you have to hold them behind the jaw, because they have really strong beaks and bendy necks. So they do turn around and bite, and they have ripped chunks of flesh out of my fingers. So we have to immobilize them and stop them moving, but without hurting them. It's quite it's a balancing act because obviously it's a wild animal, so it will try and attack you. But we don't hurt them while we're doing that. So it's a very fine act of restraining them without doing any damage to them.
That was the friendliest and happiest I've ever heard someone say that chunks have been taken out of their fingers. So thank you for that. Also, the beak changing colors is so cool. Never heard of anything like that. That's awesome. All right. You know what? I'm going to take a question from Port aux Basques, Miss Wells' class in Newfoundland. Welcome into Newfoundland. So they wanted to just cover while you're there, what do the parrots eat again? They wanted to hear that from you.
So mostly fruit, native fruits. They will eat sort of farmed, we have star fruit here and a lot of mangoes. They will eat papaya, pawpaw, which they shouldn't eat. But the native fruit in the forest, a little bit of sometimes leaves, like new leaves when they're really small and tender, and even sometimes scale insects. Kind of anything they can get hold of.
Including occasionally bits of finger. So watch out when you're in the woods. Avoid the parrots if you can. Let's go to Miss Heaton's class, and then we'll go to Miss Smith's next. Miss Haney, if you want to check in and make sure you're good to go, and then I'll take some more from YouTube. So Miss Heaton, just demute your mic and come on up.
Okay, so one of the questions for my group, I'm at a virtual school, by the way, so this is why you only get me, is how many chicks or birds are born every year?
Yeah.
So the parrots can lay up to 4 eggs in a nest. The best year we have ever monitored, we had 12 chicks hatched. 12 chicks that fledged the nest. So we get many more many more eggs are laid, not all of them hatch, and then even though they're little chicks, they often just die because they're not strong enough. We've had chicks being eaten by YCA, we have chicks being eaten by rats. So very few of them actually make it into the population. So although the population seems kind of stable, we don't actually know how many join the population, which is a big problem that could affect the population in the future.
Great question, guys. We've got one coming in on YouTube about the coco de mer. So we've talked about ivory a lot in this program and how ivory's burned now. They're trying to reject people using it for any things around their house. With coco de mer materials, are those shipped anywhere else? Could people come to the Seychelles and buy bits of coco de mer? How is it being protected nowadays?
So yeah, currently I know that there is none being exported out of the country because exactly the reason that you have mentioned earlier. And for people to come over and actually buy the kernel itself, I don't know that, but I don't think it's possible. But government are probably working on a system. Maybe people can come and buy the kernel, or they will export, but the money probably will go to conservation in the future.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, man. All right, Miss Smith's class, come on up, demute your mic and go for it. Miss Haney, I'm coming to you next if you're all good. Hi, Miss Smith.
Hello, we are a virtual class as well, so my students are in Mississauga, and Armand had a question about how COVID-19 is affecting your studies of YCA, coco de mer, and the parrots, and especially if you have scientists and ecologists visiting from other countries, how is that affecting everything?
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, yes, COVID is actually affecting us. Like recently, we were supposed to have a student that was going to come and help us to monitor about the YCA, the yellow crazy ant, monitoring inside on the canopy. So we do check the poison on the floor. We control them when they are on the floor. But in the canopy itself, as you have seen, those huge giant leaves make like an overflow for them to kind of evolve. So actually, she was supposed to come here and help us to understand what amount are there actually in the top of the canopy. But because of COVID, she cannot come anymore. So this is one aspect. And actually, a lot of scientists here are expatriates. So that means like we are from different countries, not necessarily from the Seychelles. So because of COVID again, we are forced to sometimes go back to our country and we cannot come here again. So, sorry? Yes, we lost a lot of our income, so we cannot get paid.
Well, so, a lot of our groups have mentioned this. This has been a really common question, is how COVID is affecting. And basically everywhere in the world, it's been a negative. There's no place that has benefited from COVID in any serious way. And with tourism dollars being a big part of what funds you guys, one thing that we always like to highlight when we can at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is that classrooms can donate. If you guys are keen, if you support this work, check out the website. I'll share all that when we're done. If you want to contribute to help saving parrots, coco de mer, and generally the wild and amazing wildlife of the island, Island, we'll give you the chance and the resources to do that if you're so inclined. And certainly it's a really exciting opportunity to help protect some really great species and help some really great people, as we got to hear from today. So I'll share that with absolutely everyone when we're done. I want to go to Miss Haney's class now. If you guys want to demute your mic, come on in and go for it. Hi, Miss Haney.
Hi.
Hi.
So we have a lot of questions about the yellow crazy ants. My students who are learning virtually here in Mississauga, we're wondering about what they eat and what their lifespan is.
Yeah.
We were having lots of technical difficulties, so I'm sorry if you already covered that.
That's okay. So our ants, what are they eating? How long do they live?
Okay, so YCA live for about 3 weeks.
3 months.
Sorry, 3 months. And they eat literally anything and everything. So you saw how they could kind of attack the snake and eat the snakes. And they also eat the scale insects, don't they? Yeah, on the trees as well. Dead parrots, anything.
Yeah.
Parrots that are alive, anything that they can get their hands on.
I mean, I'm inclined to ask this. I know the answer is no, but it's so funny. We're having questions about whether they eat people. So if you're walking through the rainforest in the Seychelles, are the ants going to just mob you and eat you? It's a hard no, right?
Well, if you just sleep on the floor, they will.
Okay, so don't lie down in the forest and go to a very deep slumber, but otherwise you're set. Awesome, guys.
In Queensland, they have the YCA as well, and it
Yeah.
has they've had like invasions go into people's houses and blind people in their sleep because they squirt formic acid.
Ah,
So they're really bad.
that's the most terrifying story of the day. Thanks so much for that. My nightmares are fully intact. I love this. Where is it? I want to find this question because it's my favorite question that we got. Yeah, Miss Wilbeck's class. And when you shared this, it's one of my favorite things I've ever seen in fieldwork in my life, is using the vertical ladder, shaky and scary.
So no, because I will not climb it if it's dangerous. So we put a lot of time into. So we tie our knots and check the knots are tied correctly. We make sure we've picked the tree in advance, which one we're going to tie to. So we look at where we need to put the ladder, and then we pick where we can tie it. It's quite unnerving because it's 9 meters tall, and so I wear a rock climbing harness. And then when I climb to the top, I clip onto the top of the ladder so that then I can't fall off the ladder, because then I'm using things like other equipment, like electric drills, while I'm up at the top of the ladder. So I need to know that I am safe. It is a bit unnerving and it does wobble a bit, but I put a lot of effort into tying it tightly.
Preparation is key. Well, thank you again. That's an awesome question, guys. All right, I'm going to take a couple more from YouTube and from some live classes, and we'll wrap up from there. So Miss Young's class, about the coco de mer, how do fire breaks help prevent forest fires? And I love this question because in a lot of the places we cover in the world, fire breaks are a big tool for conservation. So if you guys could explain how that works, that would be fantastic.
So yeah, I'll answer that question. So basically, how a fire break works is you remove a piece of vegetation along the land. So you make a line across the land whereby you separate the forest. So you basically put it in two halves. So if there's a fire going on one side, the space in between is too long, too far for it to spread, for it to jump to the other side. That way, when the fire, if it burns everything here, it'll die out. It'll have nothing else to burn. And also, like I mentioned earlier, for firefighters, it keeps it in a smaller area. It's easier to contain. So that way, the whole forest doesn't go burning together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm so glad we got a chance to cover that. So thanks for the question, Ms. Young's class. All right, I'm going to go back to Killaloo. If you guys have a second question, just demute your mic, Ms. Stott's group, and come on in.
Hi, yeah, we have one question from a student. So we have ferns up here in Ontario that might grow a meter high. How is it that those coco de mer palms can grow up to 10 meters?
Yeah. She said 10, so tell us if it's even more. We want to hear all about how big they get and why.
We can go up to 40
meters. 40 meters, Ms. Scott.
Yeah, it's a tree. Well, there is tree fern as well, but like.
So coco de mers are palms in general. They're pretty much the same as date or coconut. So yeah, they literally don't have branches. They only have a crown. And when they grow, their leaves will fall down, and where the leaves detach, that will form their trunk. Depending on the specimen itself, genetics and female, or if it's a male, they will grow to a certain height. But always the male will grow the tallest because of the system of pollination. You can say they use the wind, so the pollen needs to fly down to the female flower. So that's why it grows so tall in general, mostly the male. So maybe that will answer your question.
Yeah. And I mean, the ecosystem there too, like you guys get a lot of sunshine, you get a lot of rain, you have conditions that enable plants to grow that big. I mean, you're in a really fantastic, I mean, everyone should want to go to the Seychelles because it's one of the most amazing places in the world. So when COVID is over, everyone get on a plane and head there and you can see all these amazing plants in person.
Yeah, come and help us here.
Yeah, so I've got one more question online. We're getting well past our usual time. We're just having so much fun spending time with you. So I have a great solution from Henry. He wants to know, will the parrots just eat the YCAs? Can we like unleash a horde of parrots to like eat all the ants and like end both problems at once?
Oh, that would be a great solution if it turned out that they would, but sadly no. Even though they do eat scale insects, they're not insectivorous. They're mainly fruit eaters. So they eat a few insects, but they're not after the YCA. And the ants have formic acid, so they're kind of like spicy to eat. So the parrots don't want to eat them. They just get eaten by the ants.
We mentioned the acid a bunch, and I'm sorry to hear that there's no parrot solution there. Formic acid, so I brought that up on the bottom of your screen if you want to check it out. Ants in general are super cool. Not these ants, these are bad ants, but most ants are super cool. So do check that out when you're done. Guys, again, we're nearing the end of the broadcast, so what I want to do now is just take a minute to get a sense of sort of a last message. When kids leave this session, and we've got 9-10 classes from all across Ontario, Newfoundland, and beyond, what should they take away from this session? What should they do? Where should they go to learn more about the amazing work that you guys are doing?
Our webpage.
Yeah.
So we have the SIF webpage. They can visit that, and our.
Sorry. So you can go on sif.com. .sc, sorry.
Yeah.
So you can go on our webpage, and our message that we want you to take away today is like the team has said: teamwork, love nature and respect nature, and also don't forget whatever you do in your country can come back to us, so it can affect the climate and everything. So be mindful and be good for nature.
Fantastic. Guys, this has been so much fun. I've left the webpage up on the bottom of the screen for everyone to check out. I'm going to donate to you guys the moment I finish this broadcast because, again, you're doing such amazing work, and I'm so passionate about all that you guys are doing. I hope some of our classes will join me in doing that as well. Again, 10+ classes, so 250+ kids from all across Canada joining in today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And for our Seychelles team, what we do at the end of every broadcast, I'm going to bring in all our live classes. So Mr. Shattuck, Miss Haney, Miss Stott, Miss Heaton, and Miss Smith. If you guys want to say goodbye. Thanks, everybody.